January 14th meeting of the Hendry County School Board to order. If you will please stand and join us in the invocation. If you're so led. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory forever. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you will remain standing for a moment of silence in honor of Howard McIver. Mr. McIver was employed as a principal at Central Elementary School from 1957 through 1995, retiring as principal. Thank you.
At this time, we'll take citizen comment on agenda items. Are any citizens want to speak? With no citizens signed up to speak, let's continue. I'm going to do the same thing we did last meeting and put the consent agenda first. If you have any items that you want to discuss or have questions on, let's pull them now and add them as action items. Does anybody have anything to pull from the consent agenda for discussion? Okay, we do not have any items to pull. Superintendent, do I have a recommendation on the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of the consent agenda.
We have the recommendation to approve consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda passes unanimously. So we are going to move to action items now. Our first action item, do you want to introduce it?
Well, I would like to introduce Dr. Monday. Do you want to introduce who's going to present, or do you want me just to go ahead and, what?
Go ahead. Just go ahead and say them.
You will be hearing tonight from the leadership team at Clewiston Middle School. So Ms. Wills, at this time, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. Madam Chair, board members, Mr. Clay, guests. I am super excited to tell y'all about Clewiston Middle School school improvement update for January. We wanted to start with some history, starting with 2018. In 2018, that's your yellow. The school earned a C that year, and we do have some areas of Strengths, we went up 1% on our proficiency, 6% in science proficiency, and 4% in acceleration in 2019, which still gave us a D. We did have some opportunities for improvement. If you look at the red, that's where we went down. Obviously, ELA gains, math learning gains, and math proficiency. And this year, we're shooting for a 486, which is a B. We'll probably be happy with a C, but that's not where we're going. I mean, we only had 5 percentage points to get to the next plateau, and so we figured if we're going to do all these improvements, then we're hoping to get to the 486. Our school improvement goals are data-driven instruction and assessment. Using data to provide instruction that is differentiated to student needs. We're also using our 369 assessments this year. Our second goal is aligning instructional systems, so aligning our standards to our curriculum and our curriculum to our instruction, instruction to the assessment, and assessment to the intervention. Our third goal is the differentiated interventions in reading and mathematics, and those are our 3 school improvement goals. Each student is receiving small group instruction at least twice a week in reading, and our lowest 25% in math are receiving small group instruction at least twice a week. Our challenges, we had a leadership change that knocked us back a little, but not too bad. We've become a more cohesive group, so we're really gelling as a leadership team, and so we're making some strides there. Lack of highly qualified teacher candidates, probably every principal in this room can say they're dealing with the same thing. We're able to attract non-college of ed teachers, which is causing us to spend a ton of time doing PD and spending a lot of time developing what we're able to get. Across the nation and probably in this room, principals are saying the same thing that I'm saying, that there are struggles finding teachers. At the beginning we had 10 long-term subs. Right now we have 4 current vacancies, and that don't have teachers, they may have long-term subs. I think we have 6 long-term subs, and 3 of those long-term subs have bachelor's degrees and they're seeking certification. We have extremely high teacher turnover, probably more than anybody. I think if hiring was an Olympic sport, I would medal. And in 7th grade this year, now this was way back in the very beginning, one particular class had 3 different math teachers, but that, as of November 1st, they have had consistently the same math teacher. And so we've had some struggles there. And inconsistent data-driven instruction, just because it's new to our teachers. They don't have the skills at this particular point to do what we're asking them to do, and so there's been a little bit of pushback, but most of them are working super hard, and every week we see improvements with our teachers, but it's just something new that they haven't been asked to do before. Progress to date, we filled 6 teacher vacancies. I did lose both of my guidance counselors this year, and I have hired 2 guidance counselors, and that's an interim dean that got hired for some consistency. The district has been very forward-thinking and allowing us to have the coaches as much as possible. We want to thank Dr. Mundy and the coaches for just really supporting us, and we really couldn't do the things that we've implemented without their support and their knowledge base, and they have been very instrumental. Professional development on the 6th and 7th, we spent 2 days disaggregating our progress monitoring data and really planning on how to close in those gaps, how to close the learning gaps on highly tested standards and things that were already tested and students didn't get it. And we really set the bar high, and our leadership team, we took the teachers and we chunked them out, and we really spent 2 days planning up until testing, so we're excited about that. And we had Dr. Stallman with us, and she has been instrumental in preparing us for the rigor of the state. When the state comes in and they tell us to do things, we have to know how to do them, and we have to get it done. Last time the state was in, we had a great review with the state. They're loving the small groups, which I'm going to get to in a few minutes, and so we appreciate the efforts by the district. And this is some of the pictures of our professional development. That's us brainstorming with Dr. Stallman. Some other progress right now, students are getting a 45-minute intervention period daily for every student in ELA. Differentiated small group instruction for the bottom quartile in ELA and math. Our math they're also running small groups every day. And I'm going to show you an example of that in 1 second. Ongoing individual student data chats and goal setting. We're really getting students involved in their data and teaching teachers how to do it. Historically, Mrs. Perry has talked to every kid, or the leadership team has called every kid or went into their classrooms and done data chats with them. And so now we're really stretching our teachers and having our teachers talk to them. Because if I'm in Ms. Nelson's class, I want Ms. Nelson to tell me what I need. I don't need the administrator to tell me, because I have a relationship with Ms. Nelson. And we're aggressively monitoring those small group instruction. We do walkthroughs 2 to 3 times a week, a structured walkthrough, and each administrator at CMS has a group of teachers, and we walk through on a daily basis at different times so that we can monitor what we're requiring of them. This is one of our, these are our math small groups. There are 4 different stations. They could be working with a teacher, they could be working with an assistant in there. They could be at a technology station, or they could be at the hands-on station. And I have some pictures. That's the assistant working with some students, and that's the teacher in the same classroom. This is happening simultaneously in the same classroom. And if you notice the kids in the back, they're on a technology. They use iReady, they use IXL, Study Island, you know, whatever meets the needs of that standard. This is also an ELA. And I'm sure you want to see some data. This is our year-to-date data. In 2017-18, we started out at 26%, went to 32% in our proficiency by December. That went up 6 points, 11 in math, that was 17. They earned a pretty solid C that year. Last year we went up 3 points in our gains in reading and 2 in math. I don't want to just sit here and tell you every little bit. And we only had a 5% gain at this point last year, and we ended up earning a D. We were only 5 percentage points, so that 13% over there is 8 percentage points above. So we're feeling pretty confident that at this particular point, we are at least a C. We're still shooting for the B. And this is only after about 5 weeks of small group instruction. Once we got it up and running, this is about 5 weeks of small group instruction. And that's it.
Great job. I like seeing the small group.
The state loved it. Like they were really impressed. Yes. And the kids like it.
Ms. Wells, how many data chats would you say on average? You know, because I think about data chats in the elementary, where that teacher has 22, 25 kids, but in a secondary, if that teacher's doing data chats with all their students, how many?
Every Friday. In the small group math, they're supposed to have data chat every Friday.
Every Friday. And so how many, like, approximately would a 6th grade math teacher have?
The data chats are happening with the lowest 25%, these particular data chats. The other ones are only having their data chats probably 3. They're doing 3 because they're doing it around progress monitoring. And before progress monitoring, like before we take our iReady baselines, we bring the students in, talk about their goals, talk about where they need to be successful, and talk about, you know, obviously the school grade and how they can help with gains and how they can help with proficiency.
How are you doing with staff?
Well,
I know it's tough.
it goes day to day. Like you know, I'll feel like I'm on top, and then, you know, I might lose a few more here and there. But right now I just made some pretty, like, are pretty great, great hires. And so we've replaced probably 3 long-term subs with certified teachers in the past little while.
What do you think is contributing to that high turnover in your school?
I think there's a lot of things contributing to it. I think that it's hard to attract people who are not homegrown to an area like Hendry County, and I think everyone in Hendry County is struggling with that same thing. I also think that, you know, Mrs. Carter's babies are cute, and Mr. Sanchez can go for a state championship, and we're middle school. It's historically hard to staff a middle school.
Are we having comparable turnover at the Middle School? Or is it, I mean, if it's the problems here, you know, I hear from a lot of people in the community, I'm sure the other two Closton board members, that Closton Middle School is quite the center of focus for us. And, you know, how can our, you know, community help you? How, you know, what do you need from, I mean, and this is not something I expect you to answer here, but something to think about is, you know, how can your community help you? What can we advocate for, you know, for you with our constituencies, and helping get Closton Middle School back on par? Because I know what I saw at the beginning of this year is, it was very distressing. And
we have really hired a lot of people, but then, you know, we're having people retire. There's a lot of stress right now, Ms. Busen, with turnover. Like, Mr. Busen's been through it, and Ms. Sanchez has been through it. There is a tremendous amount of stress coming down from the state. They lean on us, and we put the stress on the teachers, and we're really trying to do all these new things, and there's a tremendous amount of stress in that, and I think that has some of it to do right now, because a turnaround school is very high stress, and it's a lot of pressure.
If I could add, Ms. Wills touched on part of it earlier when she said there were many teachers who were hired alternatively certified, not through Department of Education. So that when somebody who has a degree but no experience says, I will salute the flag and then go teach, and they teach at a middle school, it's not always what they are expecting. So when you look at turnover rates, some of those are people who were not certified, who were not able to get certification, who were just put in there. Some of those people have already gone. Some of those people have been, I don't have this data, but some have been successful. Some have already gone. Some have caused problems. Okay, so it's like, that's to me one of the biggest things that we have happening at CMS. The leadership team now is doing a far better job of hiring people into that school. And I think that was, among themselves, they saw that was one of the issues that they had to fight. I don't mean to be putting words in your mouth, but I think that's one of the things, and I see some people nodding who work at CMS that was happening, or that had happened. It's better. It's still a long way to go. I'm not saying it's solved or fixed, but when you just can tell and see when you walk and visit that campus that things are organized for instruction.
Madam Chair.
yes, sir.
So, Mr. Cleaver, you're saying that the morale of the people seems to be turning around from what it was, or from your observation?
Morale turns on a dime, and here's the problem. They have to increase morale at the same time, tell people you've got to improve. We cannot do this, because 2 Ds in a row brings a whole new chapter into the lives of everybody at Closton Middle School. So they're having to say, do this. In some cases, these teachers are having to do the things such as looking at their data and figuring that out for the first time. It's a whole heck of a lot of work. I think I would wait until later to put a thermometer on the morale at the school, because the good morale at the school can change in a heartbeat.
Right.
And depending on what time of year it is and how close we are to testing and all those kind of things. But I would say that the people appear to be getting ready for instruction and a more serious, there seems to be a sense of urgency. And at this point, that's what we need at Closton Middle School, not necessarily high morale. I think one will lead into the other.
And Mr. Baskin, we just had a situation today where a team was disgruntled, and we went into the meeting and we faced it head on. Look, these are the problems that, they came to me, told on them, and so we just faced it head on in the meeting, and we're like, look, you tell us what you're struggling with, because it ended up being a miscommunication. So we're trying to head those things off right out the gate and not let it just fester.
Good, good, I think that's good. Great.
All right, does anybody have any further comments on the Clifton Middle School presentation?
And any day y'all want to come in and, I'm sorry, and see the small groups, come on, because they're happening all day long.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I just want to say, we understand that the position you're in now is very, very difficult. And I appreciate it, other board members saying we appreciate your effort. And all we can ask you to do is the best that you can do and to make our school get better. So we appreciate that. We just behind you. Thank you.
And in closing, just please be thinking about ways that, we can help you advocate for what you need from the community to mitigate some of these issues. I understand middle school is challenging. I have a middle schooler. And I can understand it's a challenging crowd, but if there's things that you think this community can bring to the table, please reach out. Because I know you've got 3 advocates up here who are going to bend over backwards to help meet that need for you. So, just please be thinking about that.
Well, first of all, does the board have any questions of any of the other any of the other principals who are here? I think from the Clueston.
Do you have any
area
questions?
Yes.
Comments?
Yes, ma'am, yes, Madam Chair.
You're recognized, Reverend Friend.
Thank you. I in my trying to understand what was given to us, I'm a little confused, so I need somebody to sort of put me on the right page there. On page 3 of each and every one of the presentations, it goes down to where it's talking about the ESSA, and that was some type of, I guess, an evaluation report or something on page 3 of each one of the schools' presentations. And it has, on page, excuse me?
ESSA is Every Student Succeeds Act, and that is what replaced the No Child Left Behind.
Okay.
So we don't use No Child Left Behind anymore, we say Every Student Succeeds Act. And so everything that we do in the school improvement plan has to align with that act.
Okay, with that, I reviewed it before I came, but when I got here, some of it had been updated, but what had disturbed me was on the right side, we have all of the sub-topics listed. You have Black and African American economically disadvantaged students, and English language learners, and Hispanic students, and students with disability, and white students. And you have some highlighted. Those highlighted, what I'm understanding, did not score up a certain level or what. But at the elementary school, they all were great. When you hit the middle school, then that same group, African American group, and the students with disabilities didn't do so well. So I don't know if anybody can explain what happened, how was that. On the left side, you have 2018-19 ESSA subgroups represented. Then you have with 10 or more students. That makes a subgroup, or?
Yes, so those are actually the subgroups in each of the schools, and the ones highlighted are the ones that did not score 40% as a group on the FSA.
Okay.
If we have more,
So what the subgroup with 10 or more students, what is that telling me?
in order to constitute a subgroup, you have to have at least 10 students in that subgroup.
Okay. It's kind of clear as mud right now, but I guess not.
Yeah, so that is new this year, the federal index.
You understand my concern when you have,
Right.
two groups, and then by the time we reach the high school level, everybody else is in the group that I'm sort of concerned with.
It concerns us too.
Yeah.
Because English language learners, who's
Right.
over English language learners? So yes, it is concerning.
So that's telling me that everybody else, except for those two groups, have scored a part.
It means
Disability-
that those subgroups as a group scored 40% or below on proficiency in FSA.
Oh. You know, I'm asking, I'm seeing a lot of work we got to do, because I really would, I mean.
And the intention for coming out with that federal index is that the school improvement through the state will be assisting the schools and the districts that have subgroups that fall below that 40%. And how they do that is, for the first year or two, they leave it up to the district to try and improve those scores. And then after that, they may come in and give us more money, give us more guidance. That we haven't really made it to that point to see exactly what help they are going to be giving us.
Okay. So when I saw that, my light bulb burst, so I didn't go into thought. I'm going to ask this question here. Are the schools going to be doing something to attack this particular problem, or we're waiting to hear from the administration?
No, they should, in their school improvement plan, they should be addressing those subgroups and what they're going to do in order to help them improve academically. So that's the whole, kind of the whole concept, the whole idea behind the school improvement plan.
One other concern was, in the elementary school, it seems to be that everything is sort of going along smooth. And either when the hormones jump up in the middle school, or something happening, and they're not achieving, and then it leads over to the high school. So I just wanted to make sure I understood what that was really telling me.
Right.
But thank you, Ms. Jim. I can ask more. Yeah. Thank you.
And it's all new. That whole federal index is all new, started this year. So.
That's all I have, Madam
Are there
Chair.
any further comments? I have a few comments I want to make. I'm not going to comment on a school in particular. Just in my observation of reading through all of the student improvement plans and looking at your data from last year, a couple of trends I saw. And one was an overall across-the-board decline in the performance and gains among the lowest 25 or the 25th percentile. And that's at every school. We're losing. And to me, that feels like an indicator of an ESE breakdown. And I just want to ensure our students are receiving the appropriate interventions and supports and accommodations, specially designed instruction that enable them to achieve. I know that a lot of this has been discovered in this first quarter of the year. You know, the challenges, you don't get this till the end, this information to the end of the year, but that is an observation I have. And another broad observation was the discrepancy between ELA and math course failures, and then who's scoring a level 1 on the FSA. And what that says to me is you could be a parent and you're getting report cards coming home saying, you know, my kid's doing okay, my kid's doing okay, and then you get blindsided by a 1 on the FSA. And let me tell you, if your kid gets a 1 on the FSA, it's not like, oh, well, you know, we start again. Like that is dictating a lot of, you know, their trajectory for the next year. And that's highly concerning to me. And it leads me to question, and I don't know if I'm on the right track here, you know, how are we making our decisions as far as curriculum choice and professional development in our district? Is our curriculums not aligning? Because, you know, when I'm looking at our numbers too, you know, we'll talk about a B school or a C school or an A school, and we can still have 40 to 50% of those kids not reading proficiently, and you get an A or a B. That's crazy to me. I can't even wrap my head around that. And I just want to ensure that our curriculums are lining up with the standards-based instruction that we're getting evaluated by on FSA.
Generally, the curriculum does align. Now, I want to make sure everybody understands that you can have level 1 or 2 students at an A school. Okay, they're going to always be there. That's where our attention should be. And I've had this discussion at principals meetings, maybe 2 principals meetings ago, that instruction should be aligned to the standards. Because, and I believe the principals have taken that task to heart, and the leadership teams have taken that task to heart. Because what happens is we might be teaching our favorite dinosaur unit that is not assessed anywhere on the FSA. Or we might be going to certain places to find things that look neat and are good but are not aligned to the standards. So I have, the leadership teams at the schools have been working diligently to make sure that that happens. And we will continuously reinforce that.
And we do have schools that hold data planning meetings once a week with each grade level after school, and we pay for those out of federal funds. So they meet and they make sure that the curriculum is aligned to the standard that they are teaching. And they spend a lot of time doing that. So, and it's, I don't want to say it's fairly new, but it started when some of the schools were looked at by the state, and it has continued because it's been very successful.
Well, I know that, I'm not picking on Clifton Middle School, but, it's fresh. Right here, we had a presentation tonight. A lot of money, a lot of UNICEF money was invested in growing and improving outcomes in that school. And, based on the data, I don't think we got a return on our investment. And so, I want to make sure if we are throwing federal dollars or general fund dollars at something, that it's moving the needle for our kids. And, when you're helping, and I don't know how that happens, if it, is through the development or if it's a curriculum shift but, how many eyes are on this and judging it, and how do we judge if it is instructionally effective or if it, cost effective?
Right.
We have a lot of things that are
just
using.
got approved in November, so we're just now spending them on that professional development and different things. So hopefully we do see a return on investment as far as UNICEF goes.
So those are my 2 cents. So I guess you want to make a recommendation to approve?
Yes. Madam Chair, we recommend approval of the 2019-20 school improvement plans, report of adequate progress, school advisory council roster and schedule of meetings for Clewiston High School, Clewiston Middle School, Central Elementary School, East Side Elementary School, and West Side Elementary School as presented.
We have the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Superintendent, I have a recommendation on action item B.
Yes, I recommend approval of the gifted add-on endorsement program.
So moved.
Okay, we have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
May I interrupt you for 2 seconds?
Certainly.
Principals, feel free to make your exit. Thank you.
All right, Superintendent, you have a recommendation on action item C.
I recommend approval of the autism spectrum disorder add-on endorsement in programs K-12. So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, can we get a little brief, what does this tell me?
Dr. Staley?
Sorry. Both of the gifted and the ASD are add-on certification, so it's an add-on endorsement.
Okay.
it is, the product and the program is done through Fiddlers. So Fiddlers created this. This is basically our approval that we will utilize this for our teachers, and when we utilize this and a teacher goes through the program, through Fiddlers, and we say, yes, we will add this onto their, as an endorsement for their certification.
For teachers.
Yes,
Okay.
it is for
Okay.
teachers. Yes. So it's basically the endorsement for their certification, but the board has to approve our use of it, or our use of Fiddler's program, basically.
Okay.
So once the board approves it, we have to send it up to the, to DOE, and DOE then approves it, and then we give our stamp of approval on each person that goes through and does all of the things required, so that they can get the endorsement for either gifted or ASD, which are, you know, two of our higher
Yes.
need
Very.
for endorsement.
Very much.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Further,
How many people do you anticipate will go through these programs?
What my hope is just about every single ESE teacher, plus some gen ed teachers, but I honestly, my guess would, my hope would be at least 10 a year, on either or.
We're not mandating that
Sometimes I'm
they
high
do
in
it.
the sky that way, because I think everybody should have at least the ASD endorsement, they're in every class. But that's, you know, my ESE, background.
is there an incentive for this endorsement? Like I know we have like a one-time,
If the board wants to do that, we have a one-time reading endorsement bonus. And if the board wants to put numbers to it, they can certainly institute that.
That would be wonderful. I don't know if that has to be done separate, but that would be awesome.
The reading endorsement bonus is $1,000.
It might incentivize a few teachers to do that. Because it is time. It's time and their effort and, you know, to do it regardless of where they do it.
definitely, that's something to talk about and to think about, because the better educated and the more endorsements they have, the better, I feel the better outcome will be for our students. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion passes unanimously. So we have worked our way down to board member business. Superintendent, is that a recommendation for you on
Yes,
proposed policy?
I recommend that you grant permission for us to advertise the new proposed policy as presented.
Have the recommendation of motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair. This is on the medical marijuana treatment.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now, I'm just kind of curious, is this proposed, is this Neola that has sent this down as?
No, Neola refused to write it because they figured this reflects state law, okay, or the constitutional. I'm not the attorney. The amendment was passed by the voters saying we're going to allow medical marijuana.
Right.
Okay. The governor took office saying, how come nothing's happening with this? So we have to put this in. Neola has opted not to write a policy because their interpretation is that this amendment in Florida is in violation of the federal law.
Right.
So they did not do that. I will be real blunt and honest with you. We contacted the attorney and then who led us to Charlotte, and basically this reflects Charlotte County's proposal, their policy.
As well as my other two districts, two or three other districts. The genesis of this policy is that Charlotte got together with its neighboring counties, Lee and Sarasota, to try to come up with a policy that made sense and complied with the state law, but was still as safe as possible and flexible as possible, you know, against the fact that marijuana use is illegal in the United States. Now, the board needs to understand that we didn't just dream this up on our own. The state government is making sure that everybody has checked this box.
So what happens if we don't put this policy
They
in
withhold the
play.
superintendent's paycheck.
They withhold your paycheck?
Yes.
Well, it doesn't affect me.
I know.
Everybody stand, folks.
I'm just appealing to your better nature. I mean, this is basically Charlotte County, Glades, Hardy have the same policy.
Are their policies already in effect?
Yes.
Why is this just coming to us now?
Because we missed the deadline.
Why do we miss the deadline?
I'm not sure I have a proper answer for that, but we pushed it through when the state called us to say this was due December 1st. And so we started doing some backtracking, and I agreed that we would at least present this to the board and then have action in February.
So the state had to call you about this policy?
Yes.
And this was happening in your other districts? You're representing?
No.
It was already enacted in these other districts?
Yeah, in Hardy, they were badgered into it by the press, so the record is clear, but yes.
Madam Chairman, given the gist of what they really want to do here, what is this saying to us in a nutshell? What is this saying? This policy.
It says we're taking as little responsibility for a student using medical marijuana as possible. We're forced to allow the parent and the student a place to do whatever they're going to do with medical marijuana, consume it in whatever means is medically indicated, I guess. But we're not going to store it, we're not going to manage it, we're just going to have a safe and appropriate place for the parent and child to do what they need to do medically.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Can we put, instead of allowing them a place that you must come and get your student, take them to somewhere off campus, do your application and then bring them back? We do not want it on our campus?
No one else has tried to go down that road. I would imagine you might have the discretion to do that, but I'm not sure that it would be wise, because a child could argue, hey, it's state law, it's medically necessary, you're interfering with my free appropriate public education. So the idea was to avoid controversy and arguments, and so far so good.
I just don't like drugs on campus.
The only
They're
thing that
there.
I could
There are all
say,
kinds of drugs on campus.
Well, I understand.
Medical.
Yeah,
while I understand that, if in the event that there is something prescribed by a physician,
Exactly.
we don't make that discernment from other drugs that are administered on campus. That would be the only thing that I would caution us about.
it's true.
I could see somebody saying, well, because I know some schools administer, they're allowed, the staff is allowed to administer like ADHD medication. And would you require them, to no longer administer that? The parent would have to administer it and then take them off campus.
But that's not a narcotic, though.
Some of them are.
It is a controlled
Yes.
substance.
Yes.
Really?
Yes,
Wow.
it is a controlled substance.
It's on the bad schedule. Whatever that schedule is, Adderall medication. And we routinely store that. But we're not storing any marijuana.
Yeah, they're not
Don't-
storing.
Let's not lose sight of it. Yeah,
The
the
parent would have
brings
the
it and
parent
takes it away.
administer.
So my question then is, what about staff?
That's a whole nother thing.
Because if we allow that, staff is coming.
Well, I would submit that this really isn't something we have any discretion about under state law. I mean, that's something that you could argue about. But I think the governor, given the political posture of all this, the governor would become very active in dealing with a school district that chose not to follow the governor's office's interpretation of the law of the state board.
Right.
We'd be making a lot of trouble for ourselves if we took that position, in my opinion. And given the zeal with which they make sure that everybody checks the box.
Yeah, I understand. It just,
I move we have a permission to advertise.
I'm still, I'm still hung up on how we have to get a phone call from the state about this. And did you advise your other districts to at his policy?
Yeah, I circulated a draft policy.
Did it hit Hendry County, a draft policy?
I haven't gone back to check it, but I believe it did.
I believe the state has to call us about our policies. That's disturbing. Okay, so on Dr. Berg's motion to approve the policy, do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 4-1 with Vasquez voting nay. So now we have moved to the under board member business interviews for RFP 200004 for legal services for the board. I'd like to ask our CFO, who has overseen this, the RFP process, to come up here and tell us how this is going to
Thank you. I was
gonna
jumping the
happen
gun.
tonight.
I was jumping the gun on you.
Come on up.
Good evening. As the chairman said, RFP 200004 for legal services was issued in August 2019. The request for proposals was advertised in the local newspaper, on Demand Star, and vendor registry. In addition, our purchasing clerk sends out almost 50 emails to board certified, to education board education certified lawyers in the state of Florida. We received 2 applications, and that was with Michael McKinley, with Wititsky Ross McKinley and Young PA, and Terry J. Harmon Esquire of Sniffen and Spellman, PA. Both responses were distributed back in October. I think they were distributed on October 15th. At that time, the board determined that yes, they were both qualified and they would like to interview both. The applicants were advised that the board would like a 15-minute presentation and then open for 15 minutes question and answers. After review, after that, I expect that I have prepared, this was based on the actual RFP, I did prepare for each of you a score sheet in case you didn't have one, so that you could, after that, you could start reviewing them. Let's see, included in the packet are the reference checks. After that, we did reference checks. Of course, they only submitted everybody who liked them. You would not expect anyone to submit a reference who says they don't like them. The purchasing division this afternoon held what we called a certified random drawing to see which of the 2 applicants would go up first. Now, I've got proof of this, by the way, that was signed by everybody in attendance, and Mr. McKinley has the honor of being our first presenter. Generally, applicants prefer to leave the room, and we prepared a room across the hall for the 2 applicants, or for the 2 applicants, well, yes, for the 2 applicants to go while the other one is presenting. Therefore, while Mr. McKinley prepares, I will make sure Mr. Harmon knows his way to the other room, and I will pass out these, what is this called? Score sheets. So, okay, thank you. And that's all I have. And if you turn these in to me after the fact, after the section, I will calculate afterwards.
And just a thought from watching other boards go through things like this, your papers, your score sheets are going to be public records. So if it's
So we've got to turn these back in?
Yes, you turn these into me.
And so, just your thoughts there with your, just be mindful about when you're making notes.
Can
Madam
you
Chairman,
smell?
No, yeah, don't write that.
What's your pleasure on that?
Yeah,
Here?
come to the table.
Okay.
I don't like McKinley's haircut.
Plus for the
I
time.
said I don't like McKinley's haircut.
My beard grew also. I'm so called beard. Headed? Thank you, Madam Chairman, for the opportunity to present to the board today. As you may recall, I've been your attorney for the last 7 or 8 years or so. And before that, I had been, and still am, the attorney for Charlotte County. That's coming up on 38 years. If you add my other 2 heartland districts. That's about 60 years of total school district experience. I've probably attended 1,000 school board meetings in my time. During my career, I've learned a great deal about school law, which is a subspecialty in a number of ways. And I've also learned a great deal about the operation of school systems and school districts. The administrators here often, I believe, find it useful for me to understand, have a more detailed understanding of the day-to-day issues they confront in the operation of schools. My advice often focuses on those kinds of factors in addition to what the statutes and the courts have said about the innumerable issues that we confront. Generally speaking, people don't know what a challenging situation it is that we deal with in public education. The public education is, everybody went to school, right? So everyone's an expert on public education. People tend to have very passionate opinions about educational issues. So we're often called on to counsel with people as much as advise them. I have always enjoyed my work in public education because the work is positive. You know, you're doing something to help the community. It isn't a battle. It isn't a case of one side wins and another side loses. It's not an adversarial proceeding. We're all trying as hard as we can to do the best thing we can for the school system and our respective communities. And so, to me, that's a positive endeavor, and I've always enjoyed it and gotten a great deal of satisfaction out of it. I also would just like to point out that since we represent several school districts, there are a number of expenses that we divide among our school district clients, which means, for example, when I go to the Florida School Board Association meetings, those costs are divided up among the 4 districts, and your share of those costs amounts to about 25%. Also, it cuts down on the time that it takes to review new legislation, and there are many tasks that, you know, the marijuana policy, for example, that we're able to take care of really for all 4 districts at one time. So I think that we've done a good job of being good stewards with the school district's treasure. That pretty well concludes my prepared presentation. Except I'd like to say a couple of words about what's the best attorney for Indiana School Board. Well, that's up to the school board to decide. Every community is different, and it's a decision that you should take very seriously. It's one of the few decisions that you make without a recommendation from the superintendent. When boards ask the superintendent for a recommendation, they more often than not say, in a situation like this, they more often than not say, make a decision. That's my recommendation. So, since we all deal with the superintendent's recommendation almost everything we do, I think that's something to, you know, to bear in mind. So, with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Do you guys want to do, like, I don't know if you have questions, if you want to do one question at a time, or
You can start.
I'll lead off for you guys, lead it. Two-sided question here, or two-part question. Have you had any discussions with any member of this board or any representative of this board prior to submitting your proposal for legal services?
No, the materials say don't do that, so I didn't do that.
Okay, have you had any discussions with any member of this board or any representative of this board after submitting your proposal?
No.
Any questions on there? I mean, I have a list of questions. I'll be glad to ask questions. I just don't want to hog them.
Go ahead.
Just keep, okay, we just keep it rolling, okay, all right. You stated, you know, about different communities and counties. Share with me your expertise of Hendry County as it pertains to our school district, and explain why you're interested in providing legal services, to continue to provide legal services for the Hendry County School Board.
There are a couple of things about Hendry that, from my perspective, are unusual. The first one is the condition of the district around the time that I first came. I don't think there's any need to belabor the accomplishments or lack thereof of the prior administration, but just during the time that I have had the privilege of representing Hendry County, the district has come a long way in the way that we address problems and look at problems, and I think that it's satisfying to me to see what the group has been able to accomplish educationally, sometimes under very difficult circumstances. The funding situation has been no day at the beach, especially for small districts. The way the funding works, resources are even more scarce for the smaller districts. So I think the progress that Hendry County has made over the last 8 or 9 years or so is remarkable. You know, when I started here, we didn't even talk about education. That never even came up. For those of you who are still around, it was alarming. And the comments and the behavior that we saw from some members of the district administrative staff, that rippled out. That flowed over onto the stove. You know, I think that the things that we do and say in these meetings have a direct effect on classroom achievement. And the example that we set and the way we interact with one another and the way we address problems has a stronger ripple effect than might be immediately obvious. I also, while I have the soapbox, would point out that turmoil on the school board is bad for business. You know, I think some of us have been around long enough to see that. Businesses and families regularly make decisions on whether or not to locate or relocate to a community. And even if the district is relatively high performing, if the school board is a turbulent environment, that's a negative from the perspective of that family. It also affects the kinds of people that you can recruit, you know, to work in your district. That's a big factor in recruiting, you know, outstanding educational leadership to take that responsibility. So, okay, another interesting thing about Hendry County is it's the largest of my 3 smaller districts. So that sometimes is interesting to me. Another cultural peculiarity of Hendry County is that we're sort of the tale of 2 cities. In a sense, you know, every community is comprised of a lot of different neighborhoods and factions and constituencies, but here in Hendry we have a pretty sharp dividing line between the east and the west. And I am certain, I know for certain that in prior times those issues were a bigger deal than they have been over the last 8 years or so. So those are, in general terms, my particular observations about Hendry County and its school system.
You didn't answer why you would be interested in continuing to provide legal services.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I have enjoyed my time in Hendry County, and I take a great deal of satisfaction in whatever small part I may have contributed to the progress that we've made in the last 8 or 9 years. I would prefer to stay on board to be a part of that.
You spoke of turmoil. Do you think you added any to the board turmoil?
Oh, I would hope that I had added more than my share to turmoil. I mean, being school board attorney is not a popularity contest. A lot of times you have to tell people things they don't want to hear. The environment is fractious. You know, sometimes there are controversies and disagreements about what is best and what is right. So.
Madam Chair, on that thought, I need to know that if you are rehired from this point forward, can we rebuild that fracture, the turmoil that has existed? Can we dissipate that and move forward working together?
If I didn't think that was the greater likelihood I would not have reapplied.
It's very important to me, because as you said, it's embarrassing when we're in the social media, on the news, and we've got people arguing, and I just need to know that that will stop.
I will do everything that I can to reduce stress and turmoil. I think that's important. I think those are costly. It's costly.
A lot of time is wasted with that, I
Yeah,
agree.
time and energy that could be spent on other things like classroom achievement.
Exactly. And I understand there's always going to be some friction. We always ruffle feathers.
Local
whether it's
government
between
is not
us,
pretty.
between you. Right, and that's part of the job. But I just feel a lot of what we do could be handled more professionally and privately. So that's one of my major
And
concerns.
people talking with people is amazing.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I've been on the board, I figured out today, 26 years. I can't believe that. But
And a third of that time, we've been together.
yes, exactly. Not to dump on the prior person in that position, we see a lot more of you than we did of the one before.
Some would say that's not all good, but yeah.
We may disagree with some of your things, but and I'm not dumping on the other person. That person seemed to want to go somewhere else. And this person wanted to be here, and that makes me think that I appreciate your efforts at making that happen. Anyway.
Madam Chairman? When we deal with people that have their own way of thinking, and we can have an idea that we would think is the right idea, what I have appreciated is the fact that sometimes we can be going the wrong way, and instead of you coming a more aggressive way, you would say something like, well, you might not want to go that way. That's something that I value as a leader, how you approach me and how you tell me, okay, Mr. Brown, don't do that. I appreciated that. But what is it about you that you feel that highlights you dealing with the board that may be controversial? No one is perfect. All of us are flawed. No one is. But what is it about you that you bring to the table that no one else can bring for us?
Putting aside experience and things like that, I am really good at looking at things from the other side when the situation calls for it, expressing compassion for somebody else's point of view. Now, if they're just wrong, they're just wrong.
Yeah, right.
And that's sometimes a more challenging situation to deal with. I would say that from an intellectual standpoint, I can hold things up to the light.
I appreciate that. That's all, Madam Chair.
Madam Chairman. Mr. McKinley, you represent 4 districts in total. How many people are in your firm?
5 total.
5 total. And do you personally represent the 4 districts, or do your colleagues, and what?
In Charlotte, I have a colleague who attends substantially all of the meetings in Charlotte. I only cover, absences and things like that. So they're off the table. Glades, I only go once a month. They have 2 meetings a month, but I go to the morning meeting, which is the last Thursday of the month. And Hardee is a very calm situation. Their meetings are 10 or 15 minutes long. So they don't really need me at the meetings, and as often as not, if I'm not going to be there, I just won't send someone. However, the culture in Hardee is that the office hours that I do, not formal office hours, but the time that I spend in the superintendent's office, usually a couple hours more than once a month, are very valuable to them. And so they're like children, each one has got its own strengths and weaknesses.
So would you say that since you are what you're saying is you're different places, some of them you only go once a month, would it be beneficial to this board for you to attend here once a month? And would it be a savings to this board?
Well, yeah, you're not paying for me to drive out here and to sit through the meetings. That's, you know, on the good side. In the early days, especially in Hendry County, it was very useful to me because it's a bigger community than Wauchula. There were more people on the district administrative staff. The community was more complex. So it was helpful to me to sit through 2 meetings a month pretty much without fail. But if the board wanted to go to a system where I only was scheduled to come in once a month, that might be a good thing, you know? And then maybe with a little more discipline, we would have always an hour or 2 of office hours before the meeting. And I just can't tell you how much good I'm able to do in Hardee in particular, with that particular leadership team, how well they respond to that.
Right.
So yeah, that's no detriment to me.
So it would not inquire you to change rates or anything like that?
No.
Okay. So you would be okay with that?
I would be okay with that.
Madam Chair,
Thank you.
just to clarify for Mr. Bassman, are you stating that we would only have an attorney present at 1 meeting per month? And we would have 1 meeting without an attorney present?
Correct.
I don't like that.
I have concerns with that. What if something comes up and Mr. McKinley, we're not here to hear it and say, stop, don't say that, you're going to get yourself in hot water? Who's going to advise us?
Well, I mean, I would look at it as if we see something on our agenda that we think, okay, this is a hot topic, you know, this might cause some concern. Mr. McKinley, we need you here for this meeting.
But things happen, things come up out of the blue that we have no control over.
Even
That
just a
would
line
be-
of questioning,
Right.
like, you know, sometimes it's just out of not knowing.
Curiosity.
You know, we don't want to head down that.
And my hopes that Mr. McKinley.
For the record, we tried that here, and it just seemed to work out that there would be, you know, something boiling over on the off meetings, and I wound up, you know, coming out usually for a purpose.
Right.
So it didn't. We tried it here, and it didn't take as an additional piece of information.
Well, another concern, if you're not here for each meeting, he's going to, it's like you're getting piecemeal. You're getting information from one meeting, and you can read the minutes, but that's not the same as
Right.
sitting here and interacting with us.
And like I said before, there is a value to me sitting here and seeing who says what, not just on the board, not just on the district administrative team, but the public. You know, I have different senses of different public factions in each of my districts.
I agree.
Well, that's why there's 5 of us. That's why there's 5 of us. And I'm all right with that.
Based on your understanding of the role of providing legal services to a school board, can you describe who you feel your clients are? And what areas of your firm's expertise is most valuable in serving your client's best interests?
As to my client, I have a very clear perspective on that. My client is the district, not any individual board member, not the superintendent. There are all kinds of situations and cases, not all involving me, where there would be conflict between and among those various constituencies. But my client is the district. So ultimately, I render my advice and do my job with the district's interest at heart, not those of an individual board member or a faction on the board, but the district as a whole. Similarly, I take direction from the board as a whole on the things that I need direction on. Like, are we going to settle this case? Are we going to go with medical marijuana? All those things, the board ultimately decides those. So the board calls those shots, but my client is the district as a whole.
What areas of your firm is most, or the firm's expertise is most valuable in serving this district's best interests?
Experience in education law.
Madam Chair, may I interrupt you? Mr. McKinley's 15 minutes of questioning has passed, but I would like to point out that he only took 5 of his 15 minutes for his presentation. So I don't know if it would be appropriate to allow this to continue another 10 minutes or.
Let's ask our legal
point out
counsel.
that you have.
Can we legally
15
do
minutes
that?
has
Of course you
passed.
can.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, if we allow 30 minutes, if the other group does the
Exactly.
same.
It's 30 total.
We'll
Yeah.
afford the same to them.
Okay.
Okay.
How would your continued representation translate to the board's shared mission to improve student achievement and the overall culture of the district?
Well, cultural, I talked about it before. I think that it's very important that the meetings themselves be cordial and orderly and businesslike. And not wanting to beat up on ancient history, but some of the things that went on, even in my career, some of the things that went on in meetings in Hendry County are outstanding.
In a bad way.
In a bad way.
Not in a good way.
So trying to discourage those kinds of things is very important, which sometimes you can do, sometimes
So
you
what would you
can't.
do to discourage those kinds? Because, clearly you've said up here on the dais why this has gotten, incorrigible. And so, explain to me what you did to dissipate that or to prevent that.
Well, sometimes I give after-action comments to people who have received them. They've generally been well received. I don't recall any instances in Hendry where a citizen was getting so outrageous that everybody was shocked. And I had to say, hold the phone, we don't need to put up with this. I don't remember that happening in Hendry, but it has happened in other districts. But when the situation calls for it, as the Reverend mentioned, you just kind of get people to take a deep breath and think about what they're doing and what they're saying. Hope for the best.
Chairman, so I would like to ask, if that were to happen again, the next meeting, what are you going to do? Whether it's a disagreement between a board member and a citizen, an administrative person, you and the board member, the superintendent and a board member, whomever, what's your action plan to keep it professional?
To use body language and tone of voice and phraseology to give the message, let's just take a deep breath here. We're all here for the same purpose. We're all chasing the same goal. Let's just dial it back a little bit.
Wipe the slate, let's move forward.
Ultimately, my question is that really his responsibility to break up an argument? Mr. Flood and I are going at it, is that his
Well,
job?
That's the chairman's job.
That's the right, that's
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
The first
So-
line of defense is the chairman, but believe me, I've seen some mortified chairmen and women over time.
Right.
But if you're the chairman and you're getting out of control, whose job is it to dial her down?
You.
My job. Then I get out of control.
I feel a
and
little
the two of
attacked
us-
by this. This is not mine.
It's coming to me
Yeah, I
now,
feel
so
a little-
now
I feel
I'm
a
the
little
one
attacked.
going out of control with her. Who stops me?
I mean, there's a
We're
point
just
of.
gonna go down the.
Yeah, we'll go down the line, somebody's gonna have to say a point of personal privilege, which in parliamentary procedure means I have to use the restroom, but really means, let's just take a break,
All right, we've beaten that.
Yeah.
All right, he's going to take a point of personal privilege. And my final question is, tell me about a time that you had to tell a client something they didn't want to hear but needed to hear.
It was last week.
Or to use particular details, but it actually is something that I do with some regularity. I think Mr. Paletti will back me up. From time to time in my conversations with the administrative staff, there's a lot of say what kind of moments, when we're talking about what the law says or doesn't say, what they can and can't do, and what they can and cannot expect from the law, and what the law requires them to do. Well, I do have one good example that I would like to share. As a matter of federal law, we needed to change the direction the ship was sailing on the east side of the community as far as discipline was concerned. And that was not one awkward conversation, that was a number of awkward conversations. So, am I being too around the corner? Our disciplinary pattern was troubling. and needed to be examined vis-a-vis federal law.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything else?
I have no
Any other
further
questions?
questions. You
Any
can
further
stand down, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you like his hair now?
Yeah, I guess the haircut's growing on me.
Thank you.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Can you give me a point of personal privilege also?
And Superintendent Putty would
All
like
right,
a
now
point
we
of personal
start
privilege.
away.
Well, actually, I was gonna ask as soon as the break occurred.
Okay, so I'm going to be in the superintendent's conference room.
And Dr. Staley would like a point of personal privilege.
We'll take a 5-minute break.
Little recess here for 5 minutes.
Took a little break too, okay?
You done started, I'm gonna go ahead and go.
You get me.
Yeah, Brian, I'm gonna go ahead and put it in. I'm gonna put it for Friday.
They're on break right now, and that's what I'm gonna do as well.
How y'all doing?
Is it quiet?
Put it in there for Friday.
Whatever, you give a call, anytime.
And then that way, it's just, at least it's in.
Yeah. Why remind you of that?
You're the big things now, Ken. That's right.
You got them all signed?
I think they are.
Everybody?
Yeah, well, I think I did, but.
Give Rebecca a fancy pen.
No, I haven't.
Oh, I was gonna say, Dwayne probably took it.
Oh, I will, I will.
I like
Oh, I
that
take
pen.
it.
What is it?
You know I take it.
Yeah, I heard about that. I think it requires some thoughts and
I don't think that's the point.
He's very controversial.
And then just stimulate
I know.
to bring you back to scores and
So just because this
He
says
walked on
it.
just as I
Yeah.
got.
But we're just gonna form and have the discussion and then have the vote on it next time.
I've actually,
My husband owns one. I like the Fleischman board.
get
Use it to share.
He loves it.
Yes, to share, and so, I can see why.
It's just not that you're gonna do anything, but in case. And before we start.
This one's out of ink, Sally B. I'll give, well, kind
We
of.
have all but 5 job descriptions for the supplemental positions. We have one copy. So I just want to we'll get it tonight.
I like her skin.
It's Clemson colors, which is probably not good.
Depends on where you are, right?
Oh, yeah, I just noticed purple and orange, so. Although LSU has purple in it, so.
He got hold of it, he said, we'll deal with it after the holidays, it was due December 4th.
Any LSU fans over here?
New Orleans Saints fan, close.
Well, I'm better. I was thankful all day yesterday because I'm an Alabama fan, and that's where we should have been. I was at rightful place at the national championship, and I like Nick Saban, was not impressed.
Nick Saban was not, didn't look very comfortable
Gosh,
sitting at the
bless
TV
him.
set talking about the game.
See, then you could just see it coming down his
He
court.
looked mad.
I was supporting them with my angry glare.
Oh, yeah.
I had to find it
There's
first.
a ton of Alabama fans.
When I thought, I was like, oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a mix of Auburn, Alabama, FSU, Georgia, Florida. Yeah.
And you do have that little geographic.
All within the same spot. And the more west Panhandle you go, the more Alabama you get. Alabama fans, so.
I'll try to.
Now, that's not normal. Just I had to intervene, I didn't need a dog.
I did, I'm sorry, and I have a ton of it in the house too. Danny bought me this gigantic box of one love chocolates, like lettuce, and then I have a bunch of Berlin
All right, folks, we're gonna reconvene. We've got our board here. Don't make me smash the gavel, guys. Come on. Everybody sit down. All right, we want to reconvene and do the, like Mr. Riccardi said, 15 minutes of presentation and 15 minutes of Q&A. So I will
Take the floor, right? I will say, and I'm not trying to start with a joke or anything like that, but it feels like, you ever watch the Senate hearings on TV? Yeah. And you've got the Senate asking the one-person questions with a name tag. Oh, man. That's kind of what it feels. Now I kind of get what that's like. I always watch this, and I'm like, what is it like to be that person questioned by the entire legislature? But I guess we got a smaller version here today with y'all. So I want to thank you first for allowing me to come here to talk to y'all. I know running a school district is time-consuming, and running an RFP can be time-consuming. So thank you for allowing me to come up here. I also want to say thank you to Aunt Marie. She was very kind to me in communicating board meeting dates, what was expected of me, the 15 minutes and the 15 minutes. I had some problematic scheduling issues, and I appreciate y'all giving me a chance to come here and talk. But just so you know, she was very gracious and kind in the background and very on top of me in terms of communication. So it was nice to meet her. You know, she's in person. So I'll tell you a little bit of why we responded to the bid, and I think it goes into also a little bit about our firm. You've got the RFP I saw was in your agenda items, so I'm going to try not to just read this to you. Our firm started as a one-person shop. We were Sniffen Law Firm in Tallahassee, Florida. Rob Sniffen, our managing partner, and my partner. Small shop, worked with public entities, and over the course of time, we've just kind of grown and grown and grown and grown and grown as a firm. I started at the firm in 2007, and I think at that time we had 3 attorneys. We were in Tallahassee, but we had a statewide practice. We practiced as far west as Pensacola, as far east as Jacksonville, and all the way down to West Palm, Miami-Dade, with a 3-person shop. From then to now, as our RFP shows, we've expanded into 13 attorneys at our Tallahassee office, 3 paralegals, 3 legal assistants, 1 firm administrator, 1 billing specialist, 1 bookkeeper, and 2 law clerks, both of whom are FSU students. And as I mentioned in here, we, as of October 1st, opened up an office in West Palm Beach. What's not reflected in your materials is the lady sitting next to me, Molly Shattuck. She is a new attorney with our firm. She joined us on October 1st of 2019. So although I've been talking to Molly well in advance of then, I didn't want to put anything in our RFP referencing her. I'll let her, if you'd like to, in a little bit later, we can talk about our qualifications. But Molly is also board certified in education law. She's been practicing since 2006, so the same amount of time as me. She was a staff attorney with the school district of Martin County and was outside counsel serving as board counsel to St. Lucie County School Board. So she also comes with a wealth of experience. The reason we responded to the bid and why we put that in is, again, we are a statewide firm. I know you're down here in Hendry County and you get an 850 area code submitting you an RFP wondering what are these folks doing. Travel has never been an issue with our firm. We understand as a school board, you get bills in front of you, you have to review them every meeting, you have to approve them. and you have a constituency to answer to, taxpayers. And we recognize that the last thing you want is hiring a firm and paying them $2,000 out of the gate just for them to show up at your board meetings. So that's why we try to emphasize in our board materials, we don't charge for travel, we don't charge for our membership in Florida School Board Attorney Association, or any of our relationships with any of our school associations that we work with as well. We do not pass that cost on to board members and to boards. But again, the reason we responded is we didn't think you all were too far away for us. And adding on to that, the fact that we were opening up a West Palm Beach office, which Molly is out of our West Palm Beach office. And again, I didn't get a chance to put it in the RFP, but in terms of our presentation to you as to who would be serving as your board counsel, it would be our firm is your board counsel, with Molly being primary as well as me being, I guess, co-primary is the best way to say it. So the attorneys that would attend your meetings would be both Molly and I. Not at the same time, but it would be one of us at any time. Our firm, I think we outlined in our RFP materials, have an extensive amount of experience of working with boards. Admittedly, I don't think any attorney in our firm, other than Molly, has ever been the school board attorney of any school board where we sit at the pew. But our firm, I've been general counsel to a number of agencies and associations. Other lawyers in our firm have been general counsels to agencies and associations. Know what it's like to answer to a board. We've represented, I think I put in the materials 28, tried to add them all up to be accurate, school boards in this state. I think we've since then added 2 or 3 more as well. And again, as far east as, or west in terms of school boards, as Santa Rosa County, work in Okeechobee County, Martin County, St. Lucie County, Palm Beach County, Charlotte County, more again in an outside counsel perspective. Usually our relationships are working with the general counsel of a board on a particular issue where we get brought in. So in that respect, I tried to list also in our RFP as many practice areas where we have provided legal advice to a school board. And I think if you look at that list of practice areas, it is what a general counsel does. With the added benefit of the litigation experience that we have, whether it's ESC hearings or First Amendment cases, Public Records Act, Sunshine Law, policy. I mentioned in our RFP that our firm is outside counsel to Neola, so I was hoping during my presentation that maybe you'd fire off some medical marijuana questions at me, but, and I would do my best to answer those. But, so again, I've just tried to emphasize as many areas in terms of what we do as a firm. Aside from our school practice, which is primarily myself, Molly, Rob Sniffen is also an attorney who does purely school work. Our firm handles a tremendous amount of other work, which I think helps in a general counsel perspective because we bring more than just school board defense to the table. We also do a significant amount of employment law, defense only. We do not sue. We're not a personal injury firm or plaintiff's firm. We represent law enforcement in defense. We represent public agencies, whether it's counties, cities, or state agencies in defense matters. And we also represent employers and businesses, again, typically in the defense perspective. We've worked closely with school boards, superintendents, the Florida Association of School Administrators, FADS, FSBA, FSBAA, and a number of other FE. There's too many Fs. There's too many acronyms. I could probably do this whole presentation just in acronyms. FEN, Florida Educational Negotiators. I know there was a question, I did have the benefit of taking a look at one of your board meetings on video, and I know there was a question about our fee structure and how we model our fees. So I wanted to try to answer that because I thought that maybe that was going to be a question that I'd get. Because I hope it wasn't confusing. So the way we tried to quote it was our hourly rate as attorneys, but when you represent a client, there are a number of tasks as an attorney that you are responsible for performing for a client that don't necessarily need to be performed by an attorney. And those tasks can be performed by paralegals, obviously with the oversight of an attorney and make the attorney being ultimately responsible. Paralegals, law clerks do not deliver legal opinions. Obviously, they're not permitted to do so. That would be the unlicensed practice of law. But when it comes to getting documents organized, redacting materials, reviewing something to see if it's missed, the reason why we quote those rates is really as a benefit to you. Because if there's a task that can be performed by a non-attorney, there's no point in an attorney charging $170 an hour for a task that can be performed by a paralegal in 2 hours and reviewed by an attorney, and it costs the school board or the client half the amount of money. So also on that, we don't generally have paralegals and law clerks do a ton of work on top of our billing. So it's not a scenario where we quote you an hourly rate of $170, but in reality it's $225 because we got a paralegal running up the meter off to your side. They're really there to handle tasks that can be performed within their scope at a lot lesser cost. Law clerks, I put them in there only, they're generally used in very, very odd areas of the law where lawyers don't know the answer off the top of their head. So, we get this issue comes in and, hey, law clerk, take a peek at that real quick, let me know what you find. It just helps as a cost savings to the client. So I hope that answers that question about why we would quote that in there. Really just a benefit to y'all. So I don't know how long I've gone, whether it's been 15 minutes or not, but I'm going to do what no lawyer does. I'm going to end early and allow y'all to ask as many questions as you need. Because what we do is we tell you 15 and then it's actually 30. So I'll stop now and see if you all got any questions. If I can answer anything. I tried through our RFP, again, to be as expansive as possible. Molly joined me as well because I thought if you had any questions for her, because we'd be the faces that you'd see. Primarily Molly as well.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
you said that you're the only one currently in your group of people that has actually been a school board attorney?
Oh, thank you, Ms. Bird. I worked from 2006 till about 2016 for about 10 years for Ganano and Harrell, and Dan Harrell has been the general counsel for the school board of St. Lucie County for I don't even know how many years. He still is. So when I worked for him, I did the same type of work as him as general counsel for the school board. So I did, when he wasn't available, I sat at their meetings, I sat in on shade meetings, I did all of that type of representation in addition to, cases and things of that nature.
So if we chose you, you would be the one that would come to our meetings?
I am quite a bit closer than Tallahassee. I live in Fort Pierce personally, so it's less than a 2-hour drive.
In our West Palm office, we have 3 lawyers there. Molly's based out of our West Palm office. 2 assistants, but Molly would be the primary.
And you know that we have meetings once in Lewiston and once in LaBelle. You have to go to the...
Yeah.
I wish I lived down here, by the way, because I'm from Lee County,
Oh,
so I
yeah.
know the area. I was born and raised in Fort Myers. Went to public school in Lee County all the way up until going up to Tallahassee, and just fell in love with Tallahassee.
Did you go to Florida State?
I did. Yeah, thank you. See,
There's a couple of us here.
So look, I understand.
Reflected.
Yeah.
We're all holding answer.
I was very careful to review your scoring rubric, and I did not see college football team affiliation on your rubric. But I will say I intentionally did not choose the orange pen today.
Mr. Harmon?
Yes.
I have a 2-part question. Have you had any discussions with any member of this board or any representative of the board prior to submitting the proposal for legal services?
Prior to submitting the proposal, all I can remember is getting an email saying that there was a bid for services and encouraging me to respond to the bid.
Have you had any discussions with any member of this board or any representative of the board since you've submitted your proposal?
Yes, Anne Marie, we talked a little bit about scheduling issues, and I think it was mainly scheduling stuff, just like little background things, getting to know each other. Here's who I am, and here's where I'm out of. And I also talked to your current school board attorney about this bid a little bit. if you want me to explain, I'd be happy to.
Well, I'm aware from the building that, that you spoke with him, and I was wondering, do you find that to be typical when you have like a competitive bid process for, because I was told that you were going to withdraw your proposal. I was pleasantly surprised to see that the proposal was still on the table.
Yeah, do you want me to explain that? I think it might be helpful to the board how that, yeah. So I called, I can't remember if it was Mike called me or I called Mike. I can't remember that, but when getting to talk to Mike, he had mentioned that there was a potential investigation issue that the board might look into. Would that be something that our firm is capable of handling? And in talking to him, I said, yeah, absolutely. We do investigations. I just got done myself, finished with one in the school board on the west side. But what I told him in that conversation was, look, I can't be an independent. I got 3 young ones myself. When you're hiring a law firm to do an independent investigation, you can't, in my view, this was my view to Mike, what I said to him is, it's not good for the board to at the same time be entertaining the idea of hiring that firm. You want that firm to be an independent firm doing an investigation. So what I told him was, look, I don't feel comfortable putting the board in the position of having to potentially act on our RFP if they've just retained me to do an independent investigation. So if the board wanted to proceed with us doing the independent investigation, I would have to withdraw my RFP, because that would put the board in a predicament in the future if it was ever challenged on really whether we were independent. But since the board elected not to proceed forward with retaining us to do the investigation, that's why I'm here today, was I didn't think that that would cause, obviously, any conflict at that point.
Thank you for that clarification. But any other questions?
It's very upstanding.
It was
Professional. I like that.
I have some more questions. Based on your understanding of the role, and I'm asking the same questions I asked Mr. McKinley, so I like consistency and a fair playing field. So based on your understanding of the role of providing legal services to a school board, can you describe who you feel are your clients and what areas of your firm's expertise is most valuable in serving their best interests?
Sure. Well, the client is the school board, which is not any one member. Understanding that each member is a member of the board, ultimately the responsibility of the attorney, Molly would agree completely, is to give legal guidance to the board. So we wouldn't be any individual board member's attorney. Understanding though, when you sit up there and each board member is saying something in the microphone and there's a responsibility to chime in, we chime in. Also, you got to work hand in hand with the superintendent. But if we were brought in as board counsel, you as a body would be our client. In terms of what we can bring to the table to assist the board, as I mentioned a little bit in our interview, we get brought in a lot of times to represent boards as outside counsel, unfortunately, when bad things happen. And having worked through litigation at the state, federal level, through DOA, I do a tremendous amount of trainings. I listed in my CV all the trainings and speeches I've given. I think the knowledge of what can happen when things go wrong would assist in working with board members and talking to y'all. I get how the Sunshine Law works, not being able to facilitate conversations, Public Records Act, but having the unfortunate benefit of having defended a number of boards, I think that would help in our communications.
Prefer an ounce of prevention to a pound of cure.
Risk, I will say risk management is one of the best characteristics you can look for in folks who can understand what bad things can happen. So always trying to look out for that. And I also too, I want to highlight a little bit, and I hope it's still an answer to your question, is also working with boards not in a litigation perspective. So when you're adopting a policy or when you're looking at doing something with our firm's background in drafting policies, and defending policies, that would also assist in a non-litigation perspective as well.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, you say you have 13 attorneys on staff, is that correct?
13 in Tallahassee and 3 in West Palm.
3 in West Palm, so 16 total.
Yes.
And you represent 28 districts?
Over the time of our firm, in that perspective, we have represented 20 districts. I do not, and collectively at this moment, we do not represent 28 districts.
How many do you?
It's public record, so I can try to go through and name them off if you'd like.
No, I just, if you had a count, a rough estimate.
Yeah, I'll try to think. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just giving you an estimate.
Yes, sir.
5.
Yes, sir. I'm not gonna hold you to it.
6.
You went to FSU, you need some extra fingers? No.
I'm gonna stop at 10 because I went to FSU, because then I'm gonna have to start using my toes.
Glad you acknowledge that.
If we weren't at a public meeting, I would tell you how I really.
I feel like this is getting contentious and I need to take control of the situation.
No, it's great. It's all in good fun.
That's
I would say, if I'm just guessing, approximately a dozen.
A dozen.
If I'm just guessing. We also represent colleges and universities as well. So that's in addition to that.
And that's in addition to those school districts?
In addition to the school board work, yes.
And so you guys are pretty tied up doing this on a regular basis then?
Is your question, we're busy. We're a busy firm, but we have a duty to whatever number of clients we represent to do the job. So we wouldn't be here. If you're concerned maybe that we're too busy for the number of lawyers we have, I wouldn't be sitting here if I felt like we were too busy to do this.
Well, I mean, my question would not necessarily be that as a business owner as well. That's how you grow. You know, when you expand your clientele, you have to hire more people. So I understand that completely. That doesn't concern me. I shouldn't say it doesn't concern me. It does to a degree. But at the same time, I was just wondering how many you guys represent, and currently, because in order to get to that next level, you're trying to, if we have 16 clients, and we've got to get to 18 or 20, now we've got to have another attorney, just where are you guys? Trying to get to how many is too many, things like that is just kind of where my mind is going. And if you have 3 in West Palm now, since, what was it, October?
We have 3 attorneys in West Palm.
And that's been since, was it October?
Yeah, October
You just
1st.
opened that
Yes.
one? Okay, so I mean, obviously you're got an expanding process. Do you have in foreseeable future intention on hiring more people in that office, expanding that office?
If the needs are there, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as of right now, we are plenty capable of handling what we have now. And also considering if this were to be beneficial, we were able to work with your school district. No, I think we're at a good position right now. I think as a firm, when it comes to down south, I don't think that there's any expectation that in 6 months from now, we're going to have 25 lawyers out of our West Palm office. I don't anticipate that changing. I mean, trying to project the future, I think, again, it would be Molly, primarily myself when Molly's not available, or if there's, we can need us both, handling your work. The other attorneys in our firm, and I started my presentation by saying, our firm is trying to seek this position. While you've got your main people that work with you on a day-to-day basis, if we do get too busy, let's say Terry and Molly are just swamped because Hendry County's got a whole lot going on, we have other attorneys in our firm who are also capable of handling whatever issue may arise.
Okay. And so you say you do not charge travel time. So with her driving 2 hours to LaBelle, and then 2 hours back home, you're not charging us travel time for any of that?
Nope, not for your regular meetings. If you have 5 special meetings, we would probably talk about that at a later point. But I put in the bid for your regular meetings, which I think you meet twice a month, on every other Tuesday, or 2 Tuesdays a month, basically. No, we would not charge time for that.
Okay. I like that. All right.
I have one final question, and I asked this to the your competitor, and I actually gleaned it from your resume, and the resume, the firm's resume, in my opinion, is very impressive. I would like for you to share a time with me when you had to tell a client something that they didn't want to hear, but they needed to hear.
Okay. Well, that's not difficult to answer, but when you're sitting in the sun and you have an attorney-client privilege responsibility,
Very general.
okay. Let me try to answer it without. I can answer it in a bigger scope.
There you go.
And I'm going to try to explain a big issue that's happening right now, and it's in the context of that. Safety in schools, and primarily ESC students. When you have a responsibility under the IDEA to provide FAPE to a child, but you have a student who engages in some type of behavior that is a safety risk, the IDEA requires that even if the student is a safety risk, we still have to provide them FAPE. And the unfortunate and troubling dynamic that superintendents are dealing with, which is I have to provide FAPE to a student, but I also have to keep students safe. And having to provide guidance to schools, particularly the day-to-day superintendents, of I understand that's what you want to do, but you can't do that. And whether it's because of a student safety perspective or an IDEA perspective, that's probably conversations that I've had to say no to more recently than others I can think of. Also with sometimes student discipline issues and wanting to charge a student with a particular infraction of the code of conduct, and explaining sometimes how evidence doesn't support that charge and having to just say no to it, which reverberates down to the gen ed environment, to the school staff who feel they're not being supported when the code of conduct infraction is being lessened because the attorney told them so. That's happened too. That's the most recent I can think of.
Mr. Chairman, we talked about medical marijuana. You know, he didn't want to vote for it, but we had it brought up to us, and we ended up passing it, and you know, we worry about that. But do we make the right choice? You know, so how would you have presented it to us?
Yeah, okay. So the Amendment 2 was passed through a constitutional amendment, 2017, 16-17, legalizing medical marijuana. I don't have the constitutional amendment in front of me, but there are a couple of key provisions in there that I think impact schools. One of which says that nothing about the amendment shall require the use of medical marijuana on school grounds. One of them also saying that nothing in the amendment provides immunity under federal law. And marijuana is illegal as a Schedule I drug under federal law. And the constitutional amendment says nothing shall require schools to allow the use of medical marijuana on school grounds. Having said that, our legislature passed a bill requiring school boards to adopt a policy allowing students to use medical marijuana. My view is that that legislative enactment is in conflict with the Constitution as well as federal law. And school boards are in a real tough spot, frankly. You've got a federal law saying it's a Schedule I offense. National school lunch programs sometimes require certifications that you're a drug-free school. I believe there's a provision of ESSA that speaks to drug-free schools. And a lot of grants sometimes, federal grant dollars, require you to sign certifications that you're in compliance with all federal laws. And you have the state legislature telling you as a board to adopt a policy that's in direct violation of a federal law. So you're in a tough spot as a board to do that, particularly when the Department of Education is sending out memorandums to superintendents telling them to adopt policies or else. So to comply with state law, that's what y'all did today in my view. Again, this is just my perspective. You passed a policy permitting the use. I haven't read the policy, so I'm assuming you passed a policy permitting the use of medical marijuana on school grounds. I thought it was a great question about doing it off campus, because that was one of the things I was thinking is you are in compliance with the law when you say, yes, you may take your medical marijuana, but do it over there. But then that raises some questions about making a student leave school grounds to where do they go? Do they go across the street? Do they go with their parents? So that's a conversation I think you also have about that issue, workshop or whatnot. But it's illegal under federal law. It's not my personal opinion. It's illegal under federal law. So I think you did what you have to do in the eyes of the legislature and the chancellor of the Department of Ed. But I have concerns that it's in conflict with the will of the constitutional amendment and federal law. So that's my spiel on medical marijuana.
My golly, I was right.
Listen, that's just my view. Okay, it is a Schedule I drug. Nothing changes that. And my biggest issue, just from a practical perspective again, is when you're signing grants, saying if the grant has any language about yes, we comply with federal law.
We never even thought about that.
But at the same time, what are the chances that the United States Department of Education strips your federal funding because you passed a policy that your legislature told you to pass? I mean, but technically,
They could.
sure, if the federal government wanted to do that, but they haven't done it yet, so.
It's in Florida.
Yeah, and there's a lot of districts that are not excited about adopting that policy. And then there's some that don't care. So in obviously each district is different, and each board is different, and your student body is different than another district.
I'll sleep well tonight.
Yeah, no, you did what 67 other districts. 67 other districts in the state are being told to do. 66. You're in 67, but yeah, that's my name. Yeah,
All right,
my
well,
time's
your
up.
time is
Thank
up.
you.
Thank you for coming and talking to us.
Thank you.
Um,
Appreciate you having us.
all right, thanks
Go
for
Knowles to the Knowles in the room.
That's right, buddy. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Are you going to convert Molly as well? Will you be coming FSU Knoll?
She's a Wolverine.
Me, I'm a Wolverine, yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I get some Big Ten in here.
Okay.
I've learned not to. Don't let the heads.
I really don't take it seriously. It's all fun.
Listen, the Sniffin and Spellman and the Sniffin and Spellman are both Gators. So there is a healthy.
Just out of total transparency,
Yes,
in
sir.
a previous life, has your firm ever represented the city of LaBelle?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, well, because I probably predate your,
I started in 07 with the
Okay.
firm, and I think the firm formed in 04, April of 04. I remember. So, but we have worked with, I say potentially only because we've done work with a lot of municipalities. But thank y'all for letting us come here and say
Safe
hi to
travels.
you.
Safe travels home.
Thank you.
yeah, I remember I gave them 5 minutes, it's not, it's in their presentation, so everybody got 30 minutes.
Everybody got fair and equitable 30 minutes. So Anne Marie, do you want to explain to the board how this process is going to work as far as scoring?
Yes, I'd be delighted. What you're going to do is you are going to use your score sheet to determine the number of points for each. I will be calculating that, recalculating, redoing your math, making sure you did it right. The person who gets them, how do we do this? The most, not the most points, the person who gets the most first places. I think isn't that how we agreed it was going? That's how we agreed last time. The person who get the most first places would be the selected winner. So if you submit these to me, I will just verify that the person who gets the most First places wins. We'll bring that back to you next board meeting, which is the beginning of February, at which time you all will review your score sheets, make sure that I didn't do anything that I didn't miscalculate or misread anything you submitted. That time you will direct the superintendent to proceed with the contract, if that is appealing to all of you. You've got a question? You're gonna score them. Basically, use that score sheet to determine your number one and number two. There's three of you. There's five of you. Therefore, the easiest way to do it is whoever gets the most first places wins. If we do it by points, which would be the other option, if the chairperson is extremely liberal and gives everybody 100s and 99s, and
I'm a tough scorer.
but that's why I knew I'd be free on that. So if she gives everybody either 100 or 99, and you're very harsh, and everybody gets in the 70s, that isn't a fair comparison. So the only way to be fair is you give whoever is your highest point becomes the number one. And whoever gets 3 number ones or 4 number ones or 5 number ones will be our recommendation at the next board meeting, if that works for you.
So we keep this until.
You all, you know what, if you all want to turn that into Mr. Floody or fax it over to us tomorrow, I can tell, you guys, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Everyone, oh, you're already done.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind. If you were tired, I would say we could do this, but if you're already done, that's fine too. And again, we'll recompile it and bring this back to you at the next board meeting. Okay?
They the hair blowing like this. Yeah. They get blowing soft. Yeah. Cold out there? He likes it cold.
And now you know how I feel in the bell.
Yeah, over your head. I'll make my jacket next time. He likes it cold.
Are you cold?
Yes, blowing cold.
At this point, it
But
doesn't
you
matter.
leave with that dog, we're over here now.
I'm sorry, guys, we haven't convened, the superintendent has,
I just have
some board member business here.
2 things that I want to go over.
Okay.
One, if you will, check your emails tomorrow, Mr. Basswood. We have job descriptions for supplemental positions. We're missing 5. We have one copy that if you wanted it now, you could have it, but for interest of fairness, we can give it to all of you tomorrow through email.
Okay.
I want Mr. Basswood to have it first.
We'll send his
And then
out.
you can just email it to us, but I need him to have it in his hands tonight.
Well, I was gonna copy all these, but Mr. Baxter said he would copy it for you. I just kidding, you did say that, we're actually missing 6 of them. Okay, we'll get those 6 and get them emailed.
Second thing I want you to be aware of that Mr. Seeley and Mr. Carty are working on occurred to us over the holidays. And we got a notice that the IRS was potentially zapping us for $1 million because we failed to provide medical insurance to our employees. That's an error. We know it's an error. We got a counsel because Mr. Finley said that was not something he wanted to do, so we retained an attorney who says this is clearly an error. We have proof. We have it on our website. We have it everywhere that we offered health insurance to our employees. So that was the other thing, and that should be being cleared up. Mr. Seeley has been doing all sorts of work trying to show where it's gone. It appears that there was a box not checked, and that's what caused this. Now, you're going to ask me who did not check that box. I don't know yet, but I will let you know. But if you hear something, that's where we are, and it should be cleared up. And those are the only things that I want to report.
Do you have anything, Dr. Brown?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Thank you.
Dr. Bird? Mr. Baswin?
I'm good, thank you.
Oh, you let me down. I knew you were going to have something. All right, what about you, Ms.
Well,
Nelson?
okay. No, I'm good, we're good.
I just have one thing that I wanted to just bring up briefly and ask the district. I hadn't received any information, I don't know if anyone else on the board has, about our graduation rates that just came out. And it was a slight downtick from last year, graduation rates by like 1/10 of a point. But the data was concerning to me. I felt like there was a disparity in the achievement in the different secondary schools and among some of our subgroups that you were identifying in our the school improvement plans. And so when I started looking at it, y'all know me, y'all know I love my data, my spreadsheets, and so I just started working out some data. I didn't bring copies for everybody, but I would be glad to forward it to the superintendent if you wanted to forward it on to the board. And I definitely want you to see it, and I have percentage numbers as well as hard numbers for you guys, just to see where our kids are as far as graduating when they come into that 9th grade cohort and graduate within those 4 years. So, but I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that was going to be coming, and hopefully we can have that discussion at our next board meeting. So, do you have anything else? All right, with that, let's adjourn. Oh, hold on, we're not done.
I apologize.
Backtracking, let's go.
Ms. Riccardi, how are we looking to make our deadline?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Are we looking
and
good?
we're actually gonna beat the deadline, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, now,
I was hoping to get to talk to my boss today. I've come to my final recommendation. I just have to write it up. So
so you found everything
I
that
found
you were
everything that I'm
missing?
going to find right now. There were 3 different parts of it. I really hate to discuss it because I don't have it.
Right.
In fact, I even called my staff in today to say, can I say this to you all and make sure this doesn't make sense? And they were kind of giving me that cockeyed look. So I'm not saying it properly yet, but there are 3 portions of it. In the end, we still end up using more fund. After the cuts that I can recommend solidly, we will still end up consuming fund balance. That's the thing. And that's what I told you. My counter to that is you did last year too. In the accrual world, in the world of accruals, you did last year too. So this is not a trend that was with this budget. It is an ongoing trend. Even though we said, oh no, you had a surplus of 1.4 million, when you take into consideration that you had categoricals of over 1.8 million that were applicable last year, if you account for those, last year you ended up consuming the fund balance. That deducts from the current year. That's big picture. When I show it to you on the spreadsheet, I know all of you will all be, I see it now. I see how it could have been presented and better understood. But yeah, we're cutting, my recommendation includes about $2 million. I think you saw the cuts. I did not make any better headway on the cuts, where the cuts were possible because the schools were just tight. There's just no room for the schools, because you saw I did the big departments, the operational departments. Schools are tight. They've got a lot of costs. They don't have a lot of, they're just all human beings. But to that end, that's where we all agreed, fine, we're going to compete, we know what we're going to end up. And in the end, you won't consume it by year end, as this is what who's my predecessor? Yanisek, thank you. Mr. Yanisek always knew that at year end, we would have carry forwards. And we wouldn't spend the carry forwards, ergo we exactly didn't, we didn't spend all the money anyway. So that's what he was kept counting on. We always have a carry forward, so we'll be all right. I can't, but we're not going to budget like that. We're going to budget so we know exactly where we're going to be. We know exactly who's budgeted where. That's where we're headed with that. So it is not perfect. It is not where I'd hoped that I would be. No, you know what? We busted everything. We're going to be perfect. We're going to be way ahead. We're not. My results are not going to be as pretty but they're not going to be ugly. Right. I think that my boss, Mr. Paletti, and I think we've got a lot of work ahead of us. But It's something that we can do with working with the people in the room. When we have our DLT meeting tomorrow, we're going to start discussing it.
I would like to see, whenever you do present everything to us, if you could present to us and show us what monies you found out of that money that we had no account for. Show us, this is where we were at, this is where it went, this is what we did. So we have some numbers, a little history with it, if we could do that.
It has been a very time-consuming process so far, but I think that, I'm not saying that what I'm presenting will probably drive more questions. So why don't we, when I get to that point, it will probably say, okay, now we want to know more. So that may be where I end up, because I don't want to put too much into one presentation that will overwhelm all of us, mostly me. Thank you. But yes, I think you were pleased to find out that I'm done with it. I just got to put it in words that that we all understand. If I can't get my finance staff to understand what I was saying, I got to work on making it, refining it.
We're not going to.
I got to refine it. So that's where we'll be, but we'll definitely be next board meeting.
Thank you.
So we'll have that and the legal next board meeting.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. McCarty. All right.
I apologize, I'm done now.
No. Glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that forward. Okay, any further board member business? All right, with that, we are adjourned.